Hey everyone, and welcome to another recommendation video. Today I'm going to be talking about ES, or Eternal Sabbath, by Fuyumi Soryo. This is a seinen psychological sci-fi series and was initially published in the magazine Morning between 2001 and 2004 and released in its entirety of 8 volumes in English by Del Rey, who is now Kodansha, between 2006 and 2007. So anyone familiar with Fuyumi Soryo's previous work or other more well-known work, I think, Mars, probably has an idea of her writing style. Mars is definitely the high school, romantic drama series, very dark, very dramatic, and whilst this is a very different setting, a very different plot, there are definitely elements that Soryo has recaptured for this particular series. For anyone who is unaware of this series, it follows our main character here on the front, who is this titular ES, or Eternal Sabbath, or he has this ES gene, which a laboratory of scientists were trying to find the sort of key to extended life, trying to overwrite humanity's inability for cells to rejuvenate after a certain point, therefore giving this young man an extended lifespan of over or almost 200 years. In the process of doing that, he actually has or develops mental powers like ESP, which is not an uncommon thing within Japanese media, but it gives him the ability to read minds and sort of go into people's minds and manipulate how they think and what they're seeing and how their brain reacts to things. Throughout the majority of the story, he has taken over someone else's life. He's reclaimed someone else's name after escaping the laboratory where he was born and raised. So for majority of the series, he is known as Akiba. We also have another main character, a female scientist called Mine, who is a neuroscientist. She studies brain wave patterns and things like that. Incredibly talented and accomplished at a young age, and the two meet somewhat through circumstance. A man sort of murders another person whilst they're in the same spot, and she notices that he's the only one who doesn't really react to this horrible murder happening right in front of them, and then she sort of gets more curious and finds out he goes to the same university as her, and he's being cautious because she's one of the few people that he can't control. Her brain waves aren't accessible to him, and together they sort of partner up against what they then realize is a greater problem with his clone, who's called Isaac, who has the same abilities as our main character, but is much younger and doesn't have any sort of care or fondness for humanity. He sort of wants revenge for all the terrible things that happened to him through his life at the lab, and so he's doing things. They're trying to stop him, and yes, it really comes down to a literal battle of minds. We have the first volume cover here, the second, and then the third. I really, 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 really love Soryo's art style. It might not be for everyone, but it's just gorgeous in my opinion. Now, this is a series that I have read previously, obviously. it's one that I think a lot of different fans of different series will enjoy, and the thing it actually reminded me probably the most of, I kept going back to, was Death Note, insofar of this sort of cat and mouse game between two individuals. Of course, the difference being that we do have sort of a more cooperative protagonist, and obviously a much more obvious side of who is right, but it does actually explore the same themes that Death Note does, where if an individual is granted inhuman godly powers, what is the morality of them using them? What allows them to make judgment on or have judgment on other people. It also reminded me a lot of After School Charisma, a more recent series that is sort of the same idea of cloning, but that one uses notable historical figures for its characters. So this idea of greatness being reincarnated for the good of humanity, and again the morality of testing and dabbling in nature and going beyond what really science should be allowed to, the morality of that sort of thing, as well as something like Monster or Parasite, where we do have our main character who is technically part of this, or is the cause of the problem, but then so takes it into their own responsibility of stopping it. And even Otherworld Barbara, with the exploration of dreams and people's mentality and going into the mind to understand people, was all within this series. If this sounds interesting, I would definitely recommend you get it. It's not a super long series, and it, I guess, is technically out of print because Del Rey is no more, but it's not too hard to find these volumes. If you're a fan of Sorio's other work, Mars, again, I would recommend this then, because even though it is a very different theme and setting and genre, it still is very obviously her series and has a lot of her personal flair to it. It has a lot of really interesting elements working in tandem, and I think the way that it's executed is done really well. Again, I don't think this series is necessarily going to be a super happy one for a lot of people, but it is really interesting. I think it concludes itself in a very appropriate way, and it's very satisfactory, it's satisfying in an emotional sense, if not necessarily a intellectual sense. So do go into it with a little bit of caution if that would annoy you, but otherwise this is one that I can definitely recommend to fans of sci-fi or sort of psychological thrillers, or the sort of idea of cat and mouse mind games. As I mentioned, all of those series previously, those are great comparisons, or if you already enjoyed this series, I would recommend those titles because they are similar with their themes and handling of characters, and it does a lot of different things very well, and it uses a lot of things that are pretty standard for the genre, but again, done really well. But that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye till then.